Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. Well, you've been asking for this one for a while. Today we're going to dive into Oversimplified's Football War. And if you have not seen my other reactions to Oversimplified videos, I've put links to all of my Oversimplified reactions in the description below, as well as the link to the original content, so you can check that out. Although I'm guessing most of you have already seen it. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Take a look around, see what you like, and if you like what you see, consider subscribing. I would greatly appreciate it. We have a nice mix of not only my reaction, which really are more than reactions. I really attempt to try and give more information and add some value to what I'm reacting to. It's not just me saying wow and holy cow the whole time, but as well as that I have some original content that I would invite you to check out, from my historic site videos to vlogs just talking about various things to my series on forgotten history. So with all of that said, let's dive into Oversimplified Football War.
Quick, you have 2 seconds to name these two countries.
Honduras El Salvador.
You're wrong, unless you got it right. Then good job. They are, of course, Honduras,
I've been to Honduras.
and El Salvador. One thing these two countries have in common is being fanatic about football. Or if you're a freedom-loving patriot, soccer. But do they love it?
Or if you're a freedom-loving patriot, soccer. Most of the world calls it football. We Americans, I don't know why we call American football football, because they use their hands way more than they use their feet. It makes way more sense to call soccer football than it does to call what we call football. I've got my West Brom jersey on today. I'm a huge West Bromwich Albion fan. Love the Rangers in Scotland and the Columbus Crew here in the United States. Yeah, it's not just El Salvador and Honduras that are fanatics about football. I mean, it's pretty much the whole world, right? I can remember I was a senior in high school back during the 1994 World Cup when a guy got murdered from one of the World Cup teams. It was 94. Colombia played against the United States, the men's teams. And there was an own goal scored by one of the Colombian players. I think his name was Escobar, Andres Escobar. And he was murdered a couple of days later. It was pretty horrifying, but that shows you how seriously people take this game.
Love it so much they would go to war over it? You bet they would, and that is no bueno.
No good. I think that's what bueno means.
If you look at these two countries, you might notice one major difference, and that is that this one is a lot bigger than this one. However, this one had a larger population than this one, made up mostly of farmers, and there wasn't enough land for them to live and work on. So they started moving from El Salvador to Honduras in search of land, and by the 1960s, a huge number of illegal immigrants had crossed over the border from El Salvador.
Isn't that interesting? Illegal immigration is not something, here in the United States we talk constantly about illegal immigration coming up from Mexico, but there's a lot of that going on. You know, a lot of the people coming in from Mexico into the United States aren't coming from Mexico, they're coming through Mexico. Illegal immigration happens all over the place, it's not just there.
Meanwhile, in Honduras, it's 1963, and this guy has just staged a military coup to prevent the rise of communism, and is now the military leader of the country. He
Defenestration, he threw him out a window. We talked about that recently.
Began harassing the peasants' unions and other left-wing groups, but he's a little insecure about the legitimacy of his leadership. So he holds an election and wins, but then the opposing party says, hey man, that election was clearly corrupt and fraudulent, and also you've been bribed by the rich American banana companies who are taking all of our bananas tax-free, and now our economy is in ruins. And everyone started to get mad at him. Now, if you ever find yourself the barely legitimate military leader of a corrupt Central American country, and you start getting into hot water, here's a bit of advice that has been tried and tested throughout the century.
Start a war.
Blame something else.
Yeah, so we've talked about this in many other videos before. It's sometimes called Wag the Dog. There was a movie called Wag the Dog. You know, a lot of times people get accused of doing this when there's a scandal or when they want to take the focus of their country off of something. They create something else to put their focus on. A lot of times this really isn't happening intentionally, but sometimes it is. Back during the Monica Lewinsky scandal with Bill Clinton in the 1990s, he launched some airstrikes on a Middle Eastern country over some terrorist threats and stuff like that. And he was blamed for doing that then, that he was trying to distract people from his scandal at home. Anytime you can get people to either focus on something else or unite behind you against something else, that's what you're going to do.
So he blamed the Salvadoran immigrants for stealing all the land and all the jobs and ruining Honduras. The immigrants found themselves under attack by the hostile locals. Egged on by the rich American banana companies who wanted all the bananas to themselves, the Honduran government began evicting Salvadoran immigrants who had been living on the land for generations and started sending them back to El Salvador. The Salvadoran elite were furious and protested, citing moral reasons, but in reality, they were just getting a little too crowded. So tensions were about as high as they could be, but then...
Random Ronaldo photo there.
It's the 1970s.
By the way, can we just stop and talk? My son's a huge Manchester United fan. I know a lot of people are around the world. How epic was that first game for Cristiano Ronaldo back at Manchester United, scoring 2 goals? Now, neither one of them. I mean, the second goal was pretty cool. He megged the guy, went right between his legs. But the first goal was just kind of, I could have scored that one, but still, it was pretty epic.
World Cup qualifiers, and both countries finished top of their qualifying tables, so it was now time for them to play against each other in a series of matches. The first match took place in Honduras. The night before the game, Hondurans gathered outside the Salvadoran team's hotel, making noise and taunting them. The next day, Honduras defeated the exhausted Salvadorans with a late 90th minute goal. After the match, a young Salvadoran fan, unable to bear her country's defeat, shot herself. Disturbingly, the Salvadoran government glorified the incident and made her into a national hero. And at the next game, fans brought pictures of her to the stadium. Emotions were running high.
Which is actually something that happened with the guy I told you about earlier, the Colombian player who was murdered. He was ambushed in a parking lot by 3 guys who shot him 6 times, and the one guy kept saying "goal, goal, goal" every time he fired the shots, responding to the number of times that the word "goal" was said on the broadcast. But people brought his picture to the next game that was played. Yeah, I mean, this is pretty heavy stuff, and when you've already got tensions between these countries, and now you've got this match, it's a recipe for disaster.
As the next match took place in El Salvador, and this time the tables were turned. The Hondurans had to endure a sleepless night in their hotel, and the next day, before the match started, instead of the Honduran flag, the Salvadorans raised a dirty rag. So great job at reducing tensions. El Salvador won decisively over the exhausted Hondurans. While spectators battled in the stands, Team Honduras fled home in a bulletproof bus with rocks being thrown at them, and the Honduran coach reportedly told his players that they were lucky they lost. In response to the defeat, Hondurans began terrorizing the Salvadoran settlers even more, in some cases reportedly throwing them off their land and burning down their homes, and the immigrants began fleeing back to El Salvador. The final game in Mexico would decide who went to the World Cup. It was close, but El Salvador came out victorious, knocking Honduras out of the tournament. The atmosphere is riotous, literally, and back in Honduras, attacks on the Salvadoran immigrants further increased. This was too much for El Salvador to bear. With its people under attack and an unmanageable refugee crisis on its hands, El Salvador severed all diplomatic ties with Honduras and declared war.
Wow.
The football war is also known as the 100 Hours War, because that's how long it lasted, making it one of the shortest wars in history. El Salvador started by carrying out air raids on strategic locations within Honduras, including Toncontin International Airport, which prevented the Honduran Air Force from getting into the sky. Then, with their superior army, they began an invasion along 2 major roads, complete with light tanks and infantry. Their advance was rapid, and they were quickly approaching the Honduran capital. Then the Organization of American States met in a bit of a panic and unanimously agreed that war between El Salvador and Honduras was a bad thing and probably shouldn't continue. So they went to El Salvador and said, "Can you please stop invading?" And El Salvador declared, "Not until they stop being jerks," and so the war went on.
Well, especially because they're winning, right? You know, I mean, you've already invaded. Why stop, especially if you're on the steps of their capital and you're about to possibly win the war?
The Honduran Air Force finally got into the sky, and with aid from neighboring Nicaragua, they successfully carried out air raids on Salvadoran air bases and oil facilities, crippling the Salvadoran supply line and stopping their advance dead. Caught in a bit of a stalemate, the situation was no longer advantageous to El Salvador, so when the Organization of American States once again asked them to stop and agreed to ensure the safety of the Salvadoran immigrants, El Salvador relented, and a ceasefire was organized on the 18th of July. Then the OAS said, "Can you now please withdraw your troops from Honduras? No, please, no, please, no, please, no. Do it or we'll sanction you." You know what? Just for you? We'll do it. So El Salvador pulled its troops out of Honduras on the 2nd of August, and with casualties in the thousands...
I mean, think about it. This is a 4-day war. Those are pretty substantial casualties for a 4-day war between 2 relatively small nations. I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot, but that's a lot.
War was over. The economies of both nations were damaged by the war, and El Salvador didn't have the capability to take care of all the returning immigrants, a crisis that eventually helped cause a civil war. The war left behind land and border disputes, some of which are still a cause of tension to this day. El Salvador went on to play in the World Cup, but lost every match they played and didn't make it past the group stage.
Didn't even score a goal.
So in the end, nobody achieved anything, and there were no winners. Except for this guy.
So let's talk about this, because the World Cup qualifying for North and Central America is actually going on right now. Well, World Cup qualifying is going on for everybody, but specifically those two nations, let's see if they're involved and when they play each other. So they had the group stages already for the CONCACAF World Cup qualifying. El Salvador won their group, won 3 games out of 4, scored 13 goals, only allowed 1. They had a 1-1 tie in that one. Or was it 0-0? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, they tied 1-1 with Montserrat. And then, let's see. El Salvador and Honduras are both in it, so you see it right there. So the way this works is, now that they're down to the final 8, the final stage, the third round they call it, the top 3 finishers automatically go to the World Cup. The 4th goes to an inter-confederation playoffs, where they'll have to play someone from another confederation, probably South America, I would guess. But right now, you've got Mexico, Canada, and the United States, the 3 largest countries in the confederation that are in the lead. And the U.S. actually just played Honduras and got their first win after 2 draws. They were like tied 1-1 with 20 minutes to go, and then scored 3 goals in the last 20 minutes. I watched that game. It was pretty exciting. But so, Honduras and El Salvador are very much in this still. When did they play each other? It looks like they play each other on January 30th of 2022. So that may very well have either a spot in the playoffs or a spot in the World Cup on the line when they play each other, because that'll be the next to last match, it looks like, out of them. So big deal there. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. So let me know your thoughts about all of that. Check out some of my other oversimplified reactions. Check out my original content. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and we will see you again soon. Thanks for watching.